MJF and Adam Cole are set to challenge for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championships at AEW All In on the 0-hour pre-show before facing off in the main event for the AEW World Championship. Speaking of All In, there is a women's title tournament to determine who will compete in a four-way match at All In for the AEW Women's World Championship. Details on that, plus Jungle Boy retains the FTW Championship last night on Dynamite by defeating Rob Van Dam. The Jericho Appreciation Society has officially split up on Dynamite last night. Sting will be competing at All In. We've got details on what his tag team match is going to be. Pac is going to miss AEW All In through injury. Details on what his injury is. Bryan Danielson says William Regal is still in the Blackpool Combat Club group chat and says the faction should never split up. Plus, Full Gear is coming to Los Angeles. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. Let's start off talking about AEW Dynamite last night. And despite being the main event of All In, the main event competitors, MJF and Adam Cole, may be pulling double duty. MJF will be defending his AEW World Championship against Adam Cole at AEW All In on August 27, but that won't be the only match either one takes part in during that evening. A little bit of banter between the pair got out of hand on Wednesday's edition of AEW Dynamite. Cole told MJF that despite their loss to FTR for the AEW World Tag Team Championships on July 29, he's been paying close attention to Aussie Open's Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championship reign. As a former ROH standout that never won the tag titles, Cole suggested that he and MJF challenge for them on the 0-hour pre-show of the London pay-per-view, and after briefly balking at the notion of wrestling twice in one evening, MJF eventually got behind the idea, officially throwing out the challenge. Now, the excitement didn't last long, however, as Roderick Strong came out to ringside and made the disdain for Adam Cole's plan crystal clear. Strong has not kept his loathing of his longtime companion's newfound friendship with the Salt of the Earth a secret, seemingly becoming more and more jealous as the weeks go on. Mark Davis and Kyle Fletcher became the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions after defeating the Lucha Brothers, Best Friends, and the Kingdom in a four-way match at the Ring of Honor Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view. This will be their third overall defense, having previously retained against Iron Savages and Commander and El Hijo del Vikingo. What are your thoughts on MJF and Adam Cole wrestling twice at AEW All In, and does their participation in the 0-hour pre-show lessen their match later on in the evening? Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments section below. Now, speaking of All In, we know what the Women's Championship match is going to be, but we don't necessarily know who is going to be in it. AEW have announced a tournament to determine the competitors for a fatal four-way match for the Women's World Championship at All In at Wembley Stadium on August 27. The match graphic was displayed in the first hour of Dynamite. You can see it on the screen right there. The winner of the bout when it comes to Hikaru Shida versus Anna Jay will advance in the match. We'll speak about that in just a second. Next week, though, on Dynamite, the Bunny returns from time off due to an orbital bone injury to take on Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. Saraya will take on Sky Blue Friday on Rampage. The winners of those matches will likewise advance. Former women's champion Toni Storm, meanwhile, has received a bye in the tournament using her rematch clause after losing the title to Shida on last week's 200th episode of AEW Dynamite in the main event, and is automatically in the four-way match. The last four-way match for the Women's Championship took place at All Out in 2022, where Storm faced off against Baker, Shida, and Jamie Hayter to become the interim Women's Champion after Thunder Rosa was injured. We've also got some more details when it comes to other matches for the show, etc. Obviously, we know that it's going to be MJF versus Adam Cole. We also know that it's going to be the AEW World Tag Team Championship match with FTR versus the Young Bucks too, but some more matches have been announced. But just when it comes to the Women's Champion in the match, that is Hikaru Shida, because Hikaru Shida is still your AEW Women's World Champion. In her first defense of the title, Shida successfully defeated Anna Jay on Wednesday's episode of Dynamite. After a back-and-forth bout, Shida took home the victory after landing her finishing maneuver, the Katana. The match was Shida's second consecutive AEW Dynamite main event. Of course, Shida dethroned Toni Storm as the Women's World Champion during the main event of last week's 200th episode of Dynamite, putting an end to the Outcast members' 66-day reign as champion. She had previously held the title title after defeating Nyla Rose in a no disqualification match at AEW Double or Nothing in 2020, but her impressive 372-day run took place entirely without fans in attendance due to the COVID-19 pandemic and was put to an end after she came up short against Dr. Britt Baker at Double or Nothing in 2021. This is not the first time Shida and Jay have come face to face with one another, as they previously squared off in singles competition on two separate occasions in April and November of 2020. Jay has yet to come out on top in their series, as Shida also picked up the victory on both of those prior occasions. So what are your thoughts on this four-way match? Does it make sense that Toni Storm is allowed to get to the final and the women's champion wasn't? Who do you think wins this one, and how do you think the women's championship picture and the women's division is being booked with two consecutive Dynamite main events, or is there still a long way to go? Now, Rob Van Dam made his AEW in-ring debut last night on AEW Dynamite. Jerry Lynn, of course, had hoped that his friend and rival, WWE Hall of Famer Rob Van Dam, could teach FTW champion Jack Perry a lesson on this week's episode of AEW Dynamite, but alas, it was not to be. Perry, adorned in tights that were a homage to Lynn's ECW attire, defeated Van Dam in a hard-fought contest to retain his championship. In his first defense since winning the title at AEW Dynamite Blood and Guts, Van Dam dominated Perry so thoroughly, including sending the champion through a table, that he was able to score the visual pinfall on Perry while the referee was unconscious. Unfortunately for Van Dam, he was unable to keep Perry down long enough for a new referee to count the fall. Perry then sent Van Dam into the corner, where a steel chair had been set up earlier, and rolled Van Dam up for the pinfall. The match was Van Dam's AEW debut, adding to a long list of promotions for where the former WWE champion has wrestled. The question now becomes, what will happen with Van Dam moving forward? It had been reported that this was RVD's only commitment as far as wrestling for AEW, but given what you saw last night, do you think that RVD can still go, and would you like to see RVD continue in AEW? Let me know your thoughts about that. Now, it would appear that the Jericho Appreciation Society is no more. The Jericho Appreciation Society officially disbanded last night. During Wednesday's edition of AEW Dynamite, a mandatory meeting was held between the members of the Chris Jericho-led faction. Daniel Garcia, Matt Menard, Angelo Parker, Anna Jay, Tay Mello, and Jake Hager aired out all their grievances and didn't hold back with letting Jericho know exactly how they felt before officially exiting the group one by one. While Sammy Guevara did ultimately walk out on Jericho as well, he told Jericho he might consider returning to his side. Tensions within the group have been running hot since Don Callis offered Jericho a spot in the Don Callis family alongside himself and Konosuke Takeshita, and showered Jericho with the VIP treatment. The JAS looked to get a straightforward answer from Jericho, but grew impatient once Jericho teamed up with Takeshita against Guevara and Garcia. Although Jericho is still yet to provide an answer to Callis, he did agree to give him one on next week's episode of Dynamite after the pair crossed paths backstage following the conclusion of the segment. Jericho first recruited Hager, Menard, Parker, and Garcia to the group in March of last year. Guevara and Mello became members at the Road Rager event, and Jay joined at Fyter Fest, all three of whom helping Jericho defeat his respective opponents in those matches. Now, let's talk about AEW All In once again, because Sting will be wrestling in London at Wembley Stadium. A coffin match was announced for AEW's All In at Wembley Stadium in London during Wednesday's episode of Dynamite, as Darby Allin and a returning Sting will be taking on Swerve Strickland and AR Fox. During Dynamite, Darby came out to confront Strickland and the Mogul Embassy in the ring. Strickland was gloating about putting the fear of God into Nick Wayne, saying their faction is above the law, which Allin took issue with as a mentor of Wayne and the man who brought the 18-year-old into AEW. As Allin stood on the stage preparing for a fight, all the lights in the arena went out. When they came back on, Sting was in the ring with his trademark baseball bat, and Allin ran down the ramp to send the Mogul Embassy scattering. Sting hasn't been seen in an AEW ring since the end of June, when he teamed with Darby to take on Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara in a Tornado tag team match. Only Strickland remained in the ring as the rest of his faction fled, and the Icon raised his bat to the All-In advertisement in the arena, seemingly issuing a challenge. It was later officially announced by a graphic that Allin and Sting will face off against Strickland and Fox in a coffin match on the pay-per-view in London on August 27. So the Icon is coming to the UK. Now, one person who won't be competing at the event is Pac. On last night's episode of Dynamite, one AEW star was officially ruled out of appearing at AEW All In at London's Wembley Stadium. In a backstage segment featuring the Blackpool Combat Club, the trio officially revealed that Pac would not be able to compete at AEW All In due to injury. Later in an interview segment, the Lucha Brothers and Alex Abrahantes spoke to Renee Paquette ahead of their match against the Blackpool Combat Club later on in the evening, vowing to get vengeance for the fallen Pac, their fellow Death Triangle member. So it really sucks and is unfortunate for Pac, but he is not going to be available and he is not going to be competing on the show due to injury. Of course, if we get any more details on what that injury is, we'll let you know. As of right now, there aren't many details as to what has hurt the former AEW All-Atlantic champion. Now, Bryan Danielson has spoken about the Blackpool Combat Club, and despite returning to WWE to serve in his new role as Vice President of Global Talent Development, William Regal is still part of a Blackpool Combat Club group chat, according to Bryan Danielson. In a recent interview with Sports Illustrated, Danielson credited his fellow BCC stablemates Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, and Wheeler Yuta for reinventing themselves as heels and sticking together as a group following the abrupt exit of their former leader. Quote, "Our connection as a group feels real," Danielson said. "That's because it is. The story is we train together, we make each other better. The reality is that by wrestling together, we do make each other better. Even when Regal left, we didn't break, and he's still on our BCC group chat." While Danielson didn't go into specifics of the conversations with Regal, it's no secret that he, Moxley, and Castagnoli developed close friendships with Regal from their years together in WWE, and those bonds came shining through when they formed an on-screen alliance in AEW. To AEW's credit, BCC was not disbanded even after Regal's departure, as was previously expected, considering that the faction was named after Regal's hometown of Blackpool. Instead, the faction continued to go by the name of BCC and retained the same principles of forged by combat that Regal instilled in them. On this week's episode of Dynamite, Moxley and Castagnoli defeated the Lucha Brothers in tag team action, but not without a ton of controversy. During the closing stages of the bout, Moxley unmasked Penta El Zero Miedo, the ultimate act of disrespect towards a luchador, and to add insult to injury, Castagnoli proceeded to mock the Lucha Brothers by walking away with Penta's mask. The post-match angle likely set up a rematch between the BCC and the Lucha Brothers, possibly at the upcoming All In pay-per-view event in London, England later on this month. As far as breaking up in the future, Bryan Danielson says he's loving life in AEW as part of the BCC and wishes that the group never splits up. As I mentioned, Danielson recently spoke to Sports Illustrated, where he expressed his desire to keep the group intact. He pointed out that the group stuck together even when Danielson and fellow BCC member Jon Moxley faced each other in the final of the AEW World Championship tournament last September. Quote, "I love this group. This group should be a group that never breaks up," stated the former WWE star. "Mox and I have wrestled since the BCC started. We wrestled in the championship tournament. That didn't cause any disturbances in the BCC. That's the story of the BCC. When the BCC loses, we'll shake hands and go back to training the next day." So he's saying that, nope, we're not going to break up ever. Could you see the Blackpool Combat Club ever splitting up, or is this going to be less of a faction, more of a training group that gradually loses members and gains members over time? Let me know how you would manage the Blackpool Combat Club moving forward. Finally, Full Gear is heading to Los Angeles. It's still August, which means AEW is largely preoccupied with All In at Wembley Stadium in 2.5 weeks, All Out in Chicago in 3.5 weeks, and even Grand Slam at Arthur Ashe Stadium, which takes place in mid-September. And yet, despite all of that, the promotion is already thinking about November, when the next edition of Full Gear is set to be held in a familiar West Coast stomping ground for the promotion. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select is reporting that the current location for Full Gear is none other than Los Angeles, California, with the Kia Forum slated to host the event. AEW has previously held 2 episodes of Dynamite at the Forum, first in May 2022 and again in January of this year, which saw the Elite, including California natives the Young Bucks, defeat Death Triangle to win the AEW World Trios titles in the finals of the Best of 7 series. Of course, the first episode in LA featured the infamous MJF shoot promo on Tony Khan. With the venue decided upon, the big question is when Full Gear will take place. Internally, the date for the show is listed as Saturday, November 18, which would continue the trend of Full Gear taking place on Saturday, in contrast to most AEW pay-per-views taking place on Sunday. However, discussions had taken place regarding the pay-per-view taking place on Sunday instead, which would put Full Gear up against NFL games. It's unclear what that would mean for that week's episode of Collision, of course the show that airs on Saturday nights. In addition to Full Gear, AEW is also planning on running TV TV tapings leading up to the show in Ontario, California, including Dynamite. Though this is the working plan for the event right now, it was stressed that things could still change and that nothing had been finalized. So there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right hand corner. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.